Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Jessica Rector is the owner of a highly reputable nanny placement agency. With over a decade of experience as a professional nanny herself, Jessica has an in-depth understanding of what families need in terms of childcare. Her agency specializes in providing personalized newborn care services that cater to the unique needs of every family. In addition to running her agency, Jessica also works closely with other private staffing professionals to help them improve their businesses. She's committed to staying up to date with the latest best practices in childcare and is dedicated to providing families with the best possible childcare for their families. All right, we'll take to it. We just tried to record, but audio is not being our friend today. But I'm so excited to have you with me today, Jess. And I am excited to dive into the nanny world because I think that there's not, a lot of availability out there for childcare, and people obviously want what's best for their kids, if that be at home childcare or in a daycare. And there's so many options and it can be really overwhelming. So I'm excited to have you tell us a bit about nanny care, at home care, what people can expect if they choose to not go down the daycare rabbit hole. So do you want to start by telling everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of dive into that?
Yeah. So thank you for having me. My name is Jessica Rector. I own The Baby Boss, a nanny and postpartum placement agency that's based in Brooklyn. I am a traveling newborn care specialist and postpartum doula, and I specialize in 24/7 care. I've been with my current client since was home from the hospital, and he's now 16 months old. So we're now playing around with that line of, am I a newborn care specialist anymore?
Right.
And I am on the board of directors for the International Nanny Association. I do a lot of different community engagements with domestic household staff.
That's awesome. What kind of got you into this world? Were you in the childcare world before this? Were you really loving newborns specifically? What kind of got you into the world of all of this? Because it's like you said, you're kind of doing a little bit of everything and helping everyone. So it's really become a big expertise of yours.
So I've been in the industry for about 10 years. I myself was one of 5 girls, so children and somewhat chaos and schedules have always been part of my life. And it was something that I didn't really know I was good at until I started doing it professionally. And then about 5 years ago, I really started to focus more on newborn care, getting specific training, diving into the world of postpartum support, focusing on the 24/7 care aspect of it.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I love that. So then, because I'm sure people were always looking for your support and you kind of started the Baby Boss and have more of an agency now, I'm sure you see the 24/7 care, but I can only assume that you see so many other types of childcare that people are looking for, which I think kind of brings us to the idea of after this postpartum period, some clients come to me and they're asking, who to hire or where to look. People in Facebook groups are always asking, what childcare centers have availability and what people do you guys suggest and things like that, because people want what's best for their kid, right? And so I'm sure that you're seeing so many different types of inquiries. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what kind of types of childcare and house care people are looking for, and then what those kind of categorize as, and what people really the name of what they're looking for? Because there's so many different types of care, and what we're labeling them can be maybe not the correct label sometimes.
Yeah. I even think it goes back to a lot of the pre-postpartum planning of a lot of clients don't realize what care is available out there and what different scopes of different care providers will cover.
Right.
And when somebody wants a postpartum doula, what they're really asking for is a newborn care specialist or somebody who has a lot of extensive like sleep training experience, or someone who wants just an extra set of hands there, the convenience of having somebody there. And I find that after that's said and done and it's time to get ready to go back to work, if they're going back to work, or it's getting ready to think about what's next for them, a lot of times the confusion happens. One, where it is near impossible to get into a daycare right now. Like it
Absolutely.
is like I joke with people on Facebook in the mom groups and the parent groups where they're like, "Hey, when should I start getting on a list?" And I'm always joking of, "Have you had your first kiss yet or gone to your first high school dance? Because that's
I
probably when you
literally.
get on the list."
Yeah. I mean, I did an episode, I think it was a solo episode a little while back here on the podcast about childcare and like daycare because I was an infant teacher and I did manage a daycare and a pretty large one too. We had 240 kids a day. It's in its 18 classrooms. It was a pretty large daycare. And I would do the tours and people would often come in pregnant and be like, "Oh, I know it's early." And I'd be like, "Actually, you're not early. Like if you don't sign up in the next like 2 weeks, you're going to be on the wait list." Or like, we would have people come in that after they had a kid and they had an infant and they were like, "We're looking for care for next year." And I'm like, "Well, all of our infants that are here now are going to toddlers next year." So, it really is true. Like you have to get in so early. And I think people are so afraid, especially if they're pregnant themselves, and are looking for childcare. I think people are so afraid to go look for childcare so early because they don't want to jinx the pregnancy, right? Or like they don't want to out themselves if none of their family and friends know yet. But I would urge those people who do want that, yeah, definitely look out. Like it was so normal to have people come in and not pretend they weren't even pregnant, right? Just exploring our options for the future so we know who to sign up for. Um, but in a lot of those cases, like you said, everything is so booked up. So then that kind of brings you to the idea of, bringing someone to your child rather than bringing your child to somebody, right?
Right. And then that begins the whole what is my budget and what am I able to afford versus like what are my expectations and what do I want of that person who's coming into my home. And then when clients are when I do consults with clients where they're asking about having a nanny, especially if it's like their first time hiring a nanny, I like to explain it as we're getting on Tinder all over again. Like we are dating. Like this is like we are swiping right or left on a potential person who's going to be is almost involved in your life as your partner.
Right.
My boss likes to say that we're friends with benefits, or but the benefits are I take care of her son and we have
Yeah.
separate. But like it's dating, and especially with all of the, I guess I call it like dumpster fire chaos that's going on in the industry of like in the nanny groups and in the parent groups. There's not a good foundation of what are the standards and what are the benefits and what are the starting rates of a professional nanny and what is a reasonable hourly rate request, and why does this person charge $10 an hour but this person doesn't have as much experience and wants $45 an hour.
Right. And I heard someone say once, and like, I would love to know your input on this, is people say, having a nanny is a luxury, right? And I think for a lot of people, it is because of what they're looking for. But is there a way to also not make that like a luxury thing? And is there a way to get a nanny and somebody to come care for your child in the home, like that is more budget saving, or is that really not out there? Or are you, if you're looking for more of a budget saving opportunity and you're looking at nannies, are you typically looking at people that, aren't as trustworthy or aren't as knowledgeable? And are more like, high school level sitter type things. I'd love to know kind of what your input on that is.
I do think that having a nanny is a luxury. It is expensive. Like it's a full-time employee that you're having in your home. I do also think that there is a job out there for the right nanny and a family out there for the right nanny. And in certain areas of our country, like totally normal to drop your kid off at somebody's house where three other people have dropped their kid off, and you pay like $150 a week, and that's what your care is. And that
Right.
those people are, one of my best friends is one of those people in North Carolina. And I don't think it necessarily takes away like the quality of the person, but it also, like, a lot of times what I'm finding is families want that one-on-one. I have a nanny and this nanny does my things, but they want to pay the $150 a week for like
Yeah.
50 hours. But I definitely think that there's situations like nanny shares are an option.
Right.
Pods are an option. There's a lot of creative ways that could benefit both a nanny and family or multiple families. It's just having the having someone with the initiative to come up with those ideas and putting them together.
Yeah, totally. So if someone kind of decides that they want to go down like the nanny rabbit hole, right? Um, you know, what kind of families or family styles or jobs and like things like that of like a family kind of best matches with finding a nanny, right? Because if you are having one employee, you have to think about, okay, are we doing, a 40-hour week or is it going to be like an 80-hour a week, like 60 hours a week, So what types of people are you typically finding that come out reaching for trying to find a nanny?
There's a mix of the 9 to 5, and a lot of it is the people who have like your typical jobs where it's 9 to 5. They just aren't ready to put their infant in daycare. They would
Right,
like their infant to have like one-on-one care for a couple of years before they do daycare. And a lot of times, depending on where you're located, the daycare costs just as much as the nanny, depending on if it's private or if you're in the Upper East Side of New York, or like you might as well just have a one-on-one care.
right,
And there's also that my typical clientele that when I personally work with a client are clients who need somebody all of the hours, where you may not be working, but like you're you're available to work. Like right now, my nanny kid is in preschool. The preschool knows to call me if he needed to be picked up,
right.
even though I'm technically off because he's in preschool. So it's
Gotcha.
just a mix of the families who are the 9 to 5 that like would just prefer having someone before they put their child in school. And then the other side of it is families who they work outside the hours that a daycare would allow for them to work.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that a lot of people who do have odd hours tend to look for nannies because there's not really another option, right? Unless you have a partner that offsets your hours. I've had a client who was a nurse and worked night shifts, and her husband was a police officer. And so it worked because he could work days, but typically they both worked nights. And so, if they were both still working nights, they would have had to find somebody to come at night for, however long they can, do their jobs for. And so I think that lots of people who have that, kind of funky hours, or like you said, kind of like maybe on call hours or things like that, where the nanny might not be, fully working and with child, but at the same time, you're still on call and you're still, working in another way, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Now, do you want to like kind of differentiate the different types of nannies? Because I know you're talking about how you kind of do that 24/7, um, you know, likely in home at that point, right? I mean, where else would you be going? In home, you're living with them and similar to kind of what a lot of people would call like an au pair type of situation, right? And then there's, like you said, those 9 to 5 people that just want, just daytime care when they may not be there. So there's different types of nannies and different hours. Do you want to kind of share a little bit about the different types that people might find or what might help them match what they need?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different, I guess, titles. You have house managers who they do more of keeping the house running, keeping the fridge stocked, keeping the house cleaners on a schedule. They do errands. Then you have your family assistants who will do a little bit of what a house manager does. Plus, they'll also like pick up kids from school or do drop offs or do like afternoon care. So, a lot of families who have like older children who just need that childcare in the afternoon running around to different sporting events or
Right.
extracurriculars will
Playing
do
Uber.
like basically you're like the Uber. And then the an au pair is a person who comes from another country that's got a very strict guideline on what they can and can't do.
Right.
And a lot of times families find that they feel that is a cheaper route to go for childcare, but they also don't realize like the list of things that they are and are not allowed to do when they
Right.
get here. Um, and then just the 24/7 travel nanny. I mean, I'm basically live in and I'm on call when I'm needed. Um, you also have housekeepers, which a housekeeper typically doesn't do things with children. They're more of like managing the house, keeping the house clean. Um, and then just finding the right title of the caregiver that you need is, I feel like, a challenge right now in the
Yeah.
industry, where when I interview clients, I try to ask all different kinds of questions to try to get them to not like catch them in something, but to get them to like really tell me what it is that they want. Because like
Yes.
there's nothing wrong with you wanting someone to scrub your toilet. Absolutely not. What's wrong is when you don't tell me that and then you hire somebody and then that person who that's not in their comfortability to do is now expected to do that. So
Right.
just being honest with themselves about what it is that they actually need and then like finding out from a nanny's point of view when I interview and chat with families, I'm always like listening for keywords of like, okay, but like if you say collaborative, what kind of collaborative are you meaning? Are you meaning somebody who will send you pictures every day and like really keep you involved, or you mean someone who's has open communication? Like there's a lot of different things I think families can mean and look for, and a lot of times good good families know that they're good families, and sometimes not great families don't know that they're not great families. So figuring out what it is that they're truly looking for so that
Right.
find them the right person.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's so key is what you said of like, yeah, if you want someone to clean your toilet or you want somebody to do your meal prep or your shopping or your house cleaning, like that's totally valid, right? Like especially if your parents are working and they want to come home and they just want to spend time with their kid or, if they are working crazy hours and they don't have time to do those types of things. It's totally valid to want those things done, but being then like clear and upfront with what you need to be done and knowing what you're comfortable delegating off and then finding the right match. Because I mean, when I'm interviewing with postpartum families, I always say it, but similar to what you said, it's kind of like you're dating again, right? You have to find the match that works for you because with postpartum, I always say it's such a vulnerable time, but even with childcare, you're literally handing over your prized possession to be cared for. So, making sure that you're finding someone that you, like you said, you're comfortable with, you could talk with, you can have candid conversations, your personalities mesh, like there's so much more to it than just knowing that it's somebody that is trustworthy enough to watch your kid, right? Or like, knowing that they're capable enough to watch your kid. There's so many more like levels and layers to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to share like, or I guess it really depends on where people are listening from, but you know, like we said, nannies can sometimes be and typically are more expensive than like a traditional daycare, childcare facility. And then obviously dependent on the tasks that families are requesting of the nanny, things are going to be different and the hours and all of that. But, on average, would you be able to share kind of a little bit of what price points people would be looking at if they decided to hire a nanny?
Yes, so pretty confidently there's been a couple of salary surveys that have been out for nannies, and it is pretty safe to say that like the starting national average, this doesn't include like extra children or anything, is starting at $25 an hour.
Okay. Yeah, and I find that like, like where you're located, what you're looking for, like we said, right? Like that adds money to like more and more, and like you said, more kids, things like that. But I think that people don't realize that if you're looking for like a good childcare provider and a nanny, like, you are going to be looking at something more than that's just, minimum wage, right?
Mhm.
You're paying for, like we said, it's kind of a luxury service in a way, right? Um, let's see. I would love. I'm like looking at some of the things that you had written in like the outline because I think you had such good points too. Do you want to share a little bit about like what the difference between working with a nanny agency would be like versus if people decided to kind of go on this hunt on their own?
So working with an agency kind of it cuts out a lot of time in the process. I notice a lot of clients will be looking like on Facebook or they'll post like ads on
Right.
Facebook. And a lot of times it's the same caregivers that have been applying to everything the last 3 years, which is like a little bit of a red flag, like just
Right.
at first glance. And I've had lots of families who have really tried that route and it's just not worked out. Like for every one that has connected with their nanny on Facebook, like 10 or 20 have failed.
Right.
And so a nanny agency has already gone and vetted out potential candidates for them to even represent in their pool of candidates. So before you're even sent a nanny, we like for my agency, we do a two-step interview process. So they do an intake interview over the phone, and then we set up a Zoom interview and then connect with references. And so if all of that goes well, then we will put forward for you to finish your profile to be able to be in our candidate pool. So we only when we send clients who people have finished their profiles, so they've already been pre-vetted.
Right.
And especially if it's like a good agency, because I've been a nanny who's been on both sides of it. So I've owned an agency and then I've been represented by an agency. I personally like to keep in contact with our candidates. We host things, we keep active with our candidates. We do like a monthly sip and say where we come in and we talk about the industry. We have like our venting powwow sessions. Um,
Nice.
we do our best to make sure that nannies have the right expectations of what a family is going to request of them or ask of them, and then also to the families like of what to actually pay for the services that they're wanting.
Right.
um, and we've had great feedback of where people have posted on Facebook wanting low rates and have come to the agency and we've talked to them and they've been like, oh, that totally makes sense as to why I should pay more for that, or oh, I
Right.
didn't realize that that is a thing I could do, or
Right. Yeah.
um and then going through an agency, agencies have the opportunity or the ability to do heavier background checks than places like care.com,
Right.
which I think is especially now is extremely important to be able to have a really good in-depth background check.
100%. 100%. And then I guess my other question for you, so like through this process, I know that there's a little bit of a difference between a nanny agency and then more of like a nanny placement agency type of thing. I know a lot of some people are, hiring an agency and they have the nannies that then come and they pay through the agency versus, places that are going to be more, here's your pool, pick somebody you hire, and then normally you pay like a placement fee to the agency. Is that how things are typically working that you're finding?
So we do direct, like we for nanny placement, we do placement as far as like you pay your candidate directly. um we when we do where we pay our contractors is when we like have postpartum supporters or NCSs that go out,
Okay.
which is different. um there are like two agencies that I've heard of that have their own payroll that they pay their nannies on, and I'm not necessarily a fan of that method, but we typically do where here's your pool of candidates. We're a flat fee placement agency. We offer a 6-month replacement guarantee. You pay your person directly, and we help set up and make sure that there's a contract in place that shows when they're getting paid, how they're getting paid, and what their benefits are.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. And then I guess my only other thing that I'd love to ask and like kind of pick your brain on is, when people are interviewing for nannies, first being when should they start looking? Is it similar to daycares where they should be super far out, or is it okay to typically wait until they're, had their baby and, they're on maternity leave or parental leave and they're going to go back in a couple months. And then secondly, when they're interviewing, like what kinds of things should families be asking these nannies in order to see if they are a good fit for them?
So as far as like when to look, I go back and forth because a lot of times people are like, only start looking when it's like 6 weeks before you a start date. But then part of me is like, once you know that that's something that you are going to need and want, you should start looking, especially if you are a first time family, a first time parent, because a lot of times you don't know what you like and don't like.
Right.
And I don't limit the amount of profiles that families can see. And so when I send them profiles, I'm always trying, especially first time parents, I send them a range. Like I'll send them, even if it's somebody who I'm like, I don't think this personality will match, but I just want to get more of a feel of what they are looking for. And a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I didn't realize I wouldn't like how this person used this word in their description or bio or
Yeah.
whatever it is. So it offers them more time to figure that out. The downside is, and like I tell clients, is who you like today may not be available tomorrow because of the
Right.
market. So keeping in mind that if you find your person and you don't need them for 8 months, you're gonna have to pay them to wait.
Right. Right. And I think that that's the tricky part with nanny searching is I've heard like just like you said, so many people say, "Oh, I was in my last trimester, so I started looking, but I'm now not going to need them for 6 more months, right? Or I just had my baby and I was so much in the baby fog, and then I didn't start looking until, 2 months postpartum, and that worked out great. Or I hear it didn't work out because then I didn't have, as many options as I would have hoped, or didn't find the perfect match. And so I think it's tricky because it really just depends on where you're looking. And I think that to go back to what you were saying about the placement and like having an agency, I think that's so great and so much better than like the Facebook groups because oftentimes those Facebook groups aren't where the people that are career nannies or, full-time nannies are like hanging out. It's often, college kids or stay-at-home parents that are looking to kind of like sub in part-time gigs or things like that. And to your point exactly, a lot of the times that the people that are there looking for full-time gigs are those who have kind of been, in and out of jobs for whatever reason for the past several months or years. And so those typically aren't the people you're looking to hire either. Um, so that's such a great point. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think what was that second question that I asked you? Now I can't remember. Oh, what kinds of questions would you typically suggest asking people during a interview?
I like to ask questions that are a little bit out of the box. So like when we interview nannies, our second round of our initial interview questions for the intake call are your standard. Are you CPR certified? How many years? Tell me about yourself. And our second round of questions, depending on if they're an NCS, postpartum doula, or what their resume says they've done, is I like to ask them what's something that they're proud of or that stands out to them in their nanny career. And I like to hear like specific like stories versus like the generic, oh, the relationships I've built.
Yeah.
So to me, like actually hearing somebody take the time to tell you a 20-minute story of how they helped one of their nanny kids who was nonverbal be verbal is like to me is like a super green flag. Um, I also ask them questions like, what, how would you handle a situation where you and the parents may not agree on how something should be handled?
Mm,
I think that would be a very important question for families to ask because that's definitely going to come up. And there's definitely going to be times where, I mean, I'm sure even you as a postpartum doula, you've had clients who have like, they've done
absolutely.
things their way and
Right.
their way was not the best way. So it's like, how do you handle that? And then I'll ask them if there's somebody who like they're working with toddlers or they're working with like open to working with multiple children. I'll ask them, how would you handle a public meltdown with a toddler?
Mm,
Or how would you handle siblings arguing? Or if they're an NCS, what's your philosophy on infant feeding? Like I like to ask more specific questions other than why do you like being a nanny or
right.
what one of the things that I do like, especially if somebody's been a teacher, is why do you like caring for children privately in their home as opposed to a school setting?
Mm, yeah. I think there's so much to it. And I think the idea of like tailoring those questions to specifically what you're looking for, right? Specifically the age bracket. But if you're looking for somebody who is, really community based, you could ask them about like, going out and things that they might want to do there. Or like you said, like if they are going to be out and about a lot, asking them about public tantrums is a great question. And, navigating and finding out, how they would handle, those topics and situations that, as a family that you're looking for, I think is so crucial, which I think really starts with, your family sitting down and deciding what you want, right? And thinking about what you're looking for from a nanny, whether it be just someone to care for your child or it be somebody who really is kind of stepping up and stepping in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Is there anything else you can think of that people should know about kind of like the nanny process or hiring a nanny before they kind of dive into it themselves?
just making sure to educate yourself on what the laws are in your area. They vary state to state. Like some states, if you have a live-in, you still have to pay them overtime. Some states, overtime doesn't kick in until 55 hours or more.
Mm,
Like there's a lot of different um, rules with it when you employ domestic household staff. And also just keeping in mind that when you're hiring someone, like this person will be in your house and you are now an employer. And so, have you ever been an employer before? And what kind of employer do you want to be? And what kind of relationship would you like your children to have with your nanny? Because there are families who they prefer that professional relationship. Like you come in, you clock in, and you bring in your expertise, and they are very appreciative of that, but they don't need you to hang around for dinner. You can, leave. And that's totally fair and valid. And there's some nannies who thrive in that environment. Then you have nannies who they want to be more part of the family, and the family wants them to be part of the family as well. And the please stay for dinner or please be in our Christmas card photo.
right.
And so just deciding on that spectrum of which side of that are you on, and then what side of that do you want your nanny to be on?
Absolutely. I think that's so true because it's such a wide range of what people are looking for, and finding the right personality fit can be so crucial. So I think that's so important. I appreciate you bringing that part up. Well, I want to
Yeah,
say thank you for joining me. I think that this is such a topic that people get so nervous about. And like you said, sometimes people just don't know. So hearing about it and knowing about the different options and, a little bit about what those price points kind of look like for people and what those options are, I think can be really, really beneficial to people. So thank you for joining me.
yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.